Okay, so it's
Okay.
YouTube now.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. Welcome. Pull up my agenda here. So this is the Bowen Island Municipality Housing Advisory Committee meeting, Friday, July 5th, 2024. I'll call the meeting to order. And do we have any discussion of the agenda? Any
Does
items?
Daniel have a new item, maybe?
Hmm.
No, I think it was about 4.3,
Okay,
the agreement to lease. I can give an update.
okay.
Okay, great. So, hearing no objections, we'll pass that one unanimously. If there's no objections. No,
Fine.
okay. All passed. Thank you. Adoption of the minutes. Hopefully everybody had a chance to look them over. I looked them over. There was one minor, item on the Miller Road project. Just a tense thing. I honestly didn't think it was worth changing, but just so we verbally update that the building is still in the process of having design changes done. Just the way it was phrased said that there had been minor design changes that's still in progress. So just a minor clarification, but that's fine. Any other comments on the minutes? Nope, hearing none. Unless I hear an objection, we will pass those unanimously. Okay, moving right along. Public comments. Steph, anybody? I don't see anyone. Nope. Okay, moving right along. 4.1, community-owned housing organization working group. So Tim, do you want to give an update or do you want me to?
I can give it a whirl.
Yeah, give a start and we'll see. I can jump in after.
I think we got approval to meet with Don Lidstone, and that meeting took place yesterday. And we actually had Liam and Daniel with us as well. And it was a great discussion. And I think we got a lot of things sort of clarified in terms of what the options are and what leading towards what the best choice might be in terms of moving forward and forming the organization. What we now need to do is Ron and I need to get together and actually put together some kind of report to bring back to this group. And then hopefully we'll be able to make a recommendation to council. So I think that's the update. Anything else, Robin?
Nope, that sounds good. And just for everybody who doesn't know, Don Lidstone is a lawyer who specializes or has vast experience in working with municipalities and forming societies and I think doing even housing agreements. Anyway, so he's quite an expert in the field. And so it was very, very valuable to have whatever it was, 45 minutes or 50 minutes of his time. I was watching the clock ticking as the dollars went up. But yeah, it was great to have that talk with him. And I think we learned a lot. So yeah, next steps are, as we had before in our sort of work plan for the working group, is we'll keep going and hopefully aim for a report September, optimistically, maybe October, to have an outline of those, making that recommendation or certainly listing out pros and cons, which was great. We kind of got some pros and cons going, so we can present that in the report. And then, like say, the major items for the report are the outlining the objectives, the mandate, the roles, responsibilities. I'm just reading off of it here. Outlining kind of the operational structure. I think an operating budget and sort of the funds needed to get it going are going to be a really important thing to try to map out. Yeah, so yeah, we'll keep going with that, and we're just setting up another time to meet in a couple of weeks, and we'll keep going. So, yeah, go ahead.
And Don Lidstone's is also our municipal law firm. That's who we use. So
I didn't realize that.
Clarify that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
You mentioned it, but I just want to reiterate. Don Lidstone himself has a long history of doing this work and his firm. So they have a lot of templates for things like a partnering agreement, housing covenants, housing agreements. And so we're hoping that we can draw on their experience and have so it'll be pretty straightforward to put this all together. It's not like we're starting from scratch. So
yeah, and then we
hopefully
did
that'll-
get some numbers from him as well, because as part of the report of budget, right? Like, what is this
Yeah.
actually going to cost? So we did get a
Yeah.
sense from him about some of those legal steps that have to happen. So,
right.
okay. Any questions on that one before we go along to the next? Although, yeah, any questions?
Yes, will your report include a summary of the conversations with Don Lidstone?
Yeah, I made quite extensive notes, and mostly it was about the pros and cons and then his expertise. So yeah, that'll be included.
And you have, the province has a very large guide on housing corporations. So I assume that's in your reference material. The provincial
We do,
guide on
yeah.
housing corporations. I have a hard
Yeah.
copy floating around here somewhere, but I can't find it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Liam mentioned that in the meeting.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so yeah, we'll
Yeah,
Take a
I
look
did
at
show
that.
it to you on the screen at the last meeting, but yeah.
Mhm.
I thought I
Well-
had it sitting right out here, but it's not surfacing.
Yeah, well, one of the more interesting results of the conversation is it became very clear that a standalone society is highly preferable over the housing corporation, like a municipally owned housing corporation. So, but yeah, we'll definitely include all that, the notes and the pros and cons of that. It was very interesting discussion to have, and based on his experience to see those pros and cons. So, yeah. Okay, so that's great. So we'll make sure to include those couple of items as reference when we do the report. Any other questions or comments? No? Okay, and Nigel, thank you for joining. Very good timing.
Sorry, I'm having off-grid connectivity
Oh.
issues, but I'm good now.
Yep, no worries. You're coming through loud and clear. That's great. Okay, so we'll move on. Yeah, hopefully you're ready, Nigel, to jump right in. So 4.2 is the Housing Reserve Fund Working Group. Do you have a bit of an update for us?
I don't have any updates since our last meeting.
Okay.
I'm just, yeah, I don't have anything to share.
Okay, yeah, that's okay. No worries. We just put it in there as a placeholder, and if there's anything going on. So yeah, we can touch base at our next meeting on that one. And yeah, do let me know. Maybe you and I should connect. I keep forgetting about that because I think we're both so busy. We can try and connect
Okay.
over the summer as the chair and vice chair and yeah, make a plan. It's always this time of year I sort of start to think, oh gosh, half the year is gone already. Where are we at with our work plan? What are we going to try to get done, by the end of the year? Because it sort of feels like the summer's kind of a write-off. But anyways, we'll keep working. We'll keep pushing. Okay, so probably 4.3 agreement to lease. Lot 3 of the community land. So this is allocated to Councillor Wake, but I think Daniel Martin might also have some comments. So maybe and Allison has her hand up as well.
I just wanted to explain the fact why I voted against the resolution. It has nothing to do with entering into a lease with Outlook. It's entirely to do with the fact that we had absolutely no information as to what would be in that lease before we directed staff to prepare one. So to me, it was a pig in a poke, and I wasn't comfortable with saying, go ahead and prepare a lease without knowing any parameters.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. Daniel, did you want to maybe go first, or would you prefer Tim set the stage?
Tim, is there anything you wanted to say to set the stage, and then I can give you an update on what's happened since the council resolution?
Well, I was just going to say that we've had the council resolution, so it's with staff right now. And to Allison's point, this is going to be very similar to the last lease. So I think it's not like we're doing something dramatically different here. What's different is this lease is with Lookout rather than with Birch. We're very familiar with Lookout. But in terms of all the details of the lease, that will be coming forward, as I understand it, at the July 22nd meeting. And that's when that's when we'll understand what the agreement to lease is, which is what we're working on now. The actual terms of the lease are probably not going to be worked out until the lease itself gets prepared. Do I have that right, Daniel?
Yeah, so the council direction was to bring the agreement to lease, and it's actually been placed as a placeholder on the July 8th meeting. and I just submitted it to Liam. So it should be
Oh,
happening
okay.
on Monday's meeting. Stay
Oh,
tuned.
okay.
But yeah, so after the resolution, I took the 2019 agreement to lease we had with Birch, and I did some updating to reflect Lookout, and I circulated with Lookout and Birch, and I met yesterday with Lookout. I want to say their CFO to go over the agreement to lease. And so my report will lay out, yeah, some of the changes, and primarily they are changing Birch to Lookout, changing that 2019 agreement to lease was before the lot was subdivided. So it was like, it talked about the parent parcel, and it talked about like, we're going to subdivide, and it talked about, you know, the approving officer has to have discretion, so may not approve it. All that sort of stuff doesn't have to exist now. And then Lookout had asked for some specific changes based on their understanding of what CMHC would be looking for in an agreement or in the lease. So it says it would be right. The agreement to lease that we'd signed in 2019 was for a 60-year time frame, and Lookout had said what CMHC will be looking for is a 60-year time frame from time of occupancy. So if you enter into a 60-year lease, you know, and then Lookout applies for the building permit and starts building and, you know, gets occupancy, it's probably 2 years after we sign the lease. So we've extended it to be a 65-year lease to essentially cover that and say, okay, we're safely going to be 60 years. Lookout again also said that CMHC would look for them to pay the entire lease amount up front. So it's the agreement to lease from 2019. It was a nominal rate. I think it was $10 per year. I had a discussion with Lookout because I said, oh, normally our nominal rates are $1 per year. And I said, yes, we are charging 10 times the market rate for non-market housing. I don't know why, but I didn't change it. But we said that it could all be paid up front. And we also included a clause that the lease is expected to be in place by the end of 2024. So that's based on the council direction that it happened in 2024. And also Lookout said CMHC would be looking for some statement to that effect. So in essence, those were the changes that were made. I also went through with Lookout just that when the subdivision was created for that lot at 1033 Miller behind the health center, we have existing agreements in place about the access to it. So essentially, if you can imagine, it's like some of the access points for that lot are shared by what I always say Birch, but now I'll be saying Lookout, shared by Lookout and the health center, and some are shared by Lookout and the health center and the fire hall. So when the area was developed, some of those access points were put in already, but with cost sharing agreements. So I was just highlighting for Lookout that sort of the expectation is when that lot is developed that those costs are recouped so that it's shared. So like the health center put in stuff that's intended to be shared with the housing development. And then I state that, yeah, you know, we would then be working on a lease agreement and a housing agreement. And that's where you would capture the housing agreement in particular, is where you would capture things around like whatever the expectations are around unit type, about tenant selection, about rental rates, all of that stuff would go in the housing agreement that gets adopted by bylaw by council. And that's, I mean, it's handy because I went yesterday straight from the meeting with Don Lidstone, straight into the meeting with Lookout. And so some of that reflects when we were talking to Don about it and his advice about how to set things up, that you would have housing agreements that would lay it out. You know, you'd have like his recommendation was leased land, and then you back that up with housing agreement that lays out sort of the details of the housing. And I was like, oh, that's great. That's just what we're talking about with Lookout literally minutes later. So the agreement to lease essentially reserves the land. And one of the things I say in the report is that when our 2019 agreement to lease expired in 2022, in essence, for staff's point of view, it's like the council direction was still that this lot was reserved for affordable housing. So absent other council direction, that was our view, that, you know, technically it had expired, but it didn't actually change any of our direction. And so this agreement is just to renew that commitment for the land. And then we would be looking to do the more detailed lease stuff, some of which with the lease and the housing agreement, I think sort of gets crafted too in concert with the building and the funding. So we want a housing agreement that does specify, so council has certainty that this is providing affordable housing, but we want it to mesh with, you know, whatever the expectations are from BC Housing in terms of the funding that's provided. Like, we don't want to have different expectations, which could cause issues. We want to see how they work together. Yeah, I think that's most of my update, but my report will probably be live by this afternoon for council to discuss on Monday. So
That's great, Daniel. Thanks for clarifying that. And yeah, just to reiterate what you just said about the rent rates, exactly. The BC Housing Funding has a very prescriptive mix of rent rates, and the building is basically designed to have a mix of unit types. So it's great to hear we'll just kind of hopefully work together with the mix that's already happening. And that'll be reflected in the housing agreement. So great. And sorry I couldn't make the meeting yesterday. So hopefully that all went okay with you in Lookout. And yeah, okay. Any comments or questions? Yeah, Tim, go ahead.
Just wondering, Daniel and Robin, if Lookout is developing and operating the project, but the direction in terms of what's going to be in the housing agreement and the qualification process, wait lists, administration of covenants, all that sort of thing, that is going to be done by Birch, I presume.
That's the working theory at the moment, and I think it will potentially change depending on the work of our working group with the community housing organization. So I would hope if whatever the result is by the end of this year, if council directs for a community housing organization, if that's Birch, if it's a different one, if it's a new one, whatever the end result of that is, at council's direction, I would hope that entity would be the one to do it. That would be ideal. In the absence of that, it would be Birch. That's kind of what we've been working towards. And then if it doesn't all, I think, fall into place in time, then it could be Birch. And then I'm sure in a year or two, if things change, we can alter that. I mean, things can be altered, right? As long as everybody's in agreement, leases and paperwork can be altered to change who's doing what if it needed to. I assume, Daniel, that's something that can be, as long as all the parties are in agreement, you can change a contract and a lease. So, but yes, the intention is Birch or the equivalent group, a Bowen-based, separate nonprofit society would be the one helping with designing, crafting the tenant selection. If it's us, the plan is, and we'd actually started implementing this a few years ago, would be some community engagement, having a community advisory group, to outline what would be the criteria, what would be the selection process, with the goal of it being as transparent and objective as possible. Likely having a completely separate committee, looking at anonymized applications, that kind of thing, because we really want to make sure that it's, as fair and transparent as possible, that there isn't favoritism. It isn't, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, because this person you're going to get in. We don't want any of that. We want it to be really fair and transparent. That's our goal.
And I just wanted to be clear that it won't be Lookout doing that. I mean, there are some concerns that, well, wait a minute, is Lookout going to start bringing people over from Vancouver? And
that's a great point. And my understanding going forward is that is not their role. So I'm going to make a note of that. And in our next meeting, we have bi-weekly project meetings. I'm going to just absolutely ask that really clearly, and I can bring that answer back. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Sorry, Allison, did you have a question? Did I see your?
Well, I guess it was partly answered by that last one, but what does Lookout do with all their other projects? Are they the ones that do the tenant selection and administer the housing agreements and all that stuff and all their other projects?
I'd have to ask them. I'm not familiar with their operations enough to know how they do their tenant selection. Yeah,
because if the housing agreement, I hope, would set out that it has to be people that are employed on Bowen, or we had some criteria in others so that people aren't moving over here, but it's people that have already resided on Bowen and are needing housing.
Yeah, and that's always been Birch's intention from the beginning of the project. And in fact, we use the language of Bowen Island community members. And we define that as people who live on the island, who work on the island, although maybe they don't live here. And also broadly, people who have a strong connection to the island, because acknowledging there are people who maybe lived on Bowen for a long time, but had to move for a variety of reasons. Maybe they couldn't find housing and they've been off for 5 years. They'd love to come back. So I think that's going to be part of that criteria, is what is your connection? There's people who maybe grew up on Bowen moved away, for education and career, and they have a family now and they'd love to move back to Bowen, but they can't afford it, right? So leaving that door open, that if there is a strong community connection, they don't necessarily have to be a resident right now. They don't necessarily have to be employed on the island right now, but if they can demonstrate that really strong connection. So that would be discussion and part of the process, but certainly that's our intention, is that those Bowen Island community members would have priority on the units. Yeah, but I will absolutely clarify that with Lookout, just so everybody's 100% clear. Yeah.
And what sort of requirements does CMHC have?
The funders, so CMHC
that goes with the grant.
Yeah, CMHC, I don't believe will have any. I can double check, but it's BC Housing, because they're the ones who provide
I'm
the
sorry,
ongoing.
I meant BC Housing.
Okay,
Sorry.
yeah, no, that's okay. So BC Housing, theirs is, I believe, mainly financial. That's my understanding. I don't believe will have much else to say in terms of, where they come from and all this. Theirs will be, because it's a financial subsidy, you will have to prove your income and financial need to get those subsidized units, of which there's a number.
But there's a building grant. So is the grant for the building, the money, the big fat grant, that's come from BC Housing?
Correct. It's all part of the same program.
Yeah.
The Community Housing Fund is.
Yeah, have they stipulated in that grant how many units have to be affordable, or size, or for type of families, or anything?
They've stipulated the mix of rent and the rent types and the rent levels. And
what is that?
So this has been documented and shared many times. Happy to share it again, because I know many people don't know. So the mix is 20% low income units. So that's very low income. So people who are on disability or welfare or a variety of things, and receive a housing subsidy for that. So that's 20%. 50% is what's called rent geared to income. And that you only pay, you prove your income, I think, on an annual basis, and you only pay 30% of your income to rent. And then the balance is subsidized. So those two categories are subsidized. That's part of the program. And those are the ones, I believe, don't 100% quote me, these are the ones you would have to prove financially in order to become a tenant. And then I believe on an annual basis, you renew that. So you have to share your financial information to receive that subsidy from the government. And then the remaining 30% is what's called low end of market. And so it's essentially meant to be a market unit for, just the average working person, but it's at the low end of market. And I don't remember off the top of my head the measure of that, but there is a measure essentially of like the region or the rent levels, and then a certain percentage below. I can't remember the exact details of that. And I would have to confirm, I don't believe there's an income test for that one, but that one I'm not as clear on if there's a financial criteria to be met. So we'd have to get those details.
Okay, and all that's stipulated in the grant award.
Correct. Yeah. I believe, yes. It was certainly part of the program when we applied. That was all part of what the program is, the funding program. Yeah. So it's that, like you were saying, it's the lump sum of money. That's a capital equity input into it, and the 60-year housing agreement and the ongoing subsidies and maintaining those particular rent levels. It's all part of the same program.
And Lookout's going to pop up the rest of the money to build the building?
Well, no, that's part of the challenge of getting the building built, is you have to make the numbers work. And so even with free land, it's extremely difficult to make all of the numbers work. And so getting the large subsidy from that program, working with CMHC, I think, to get a little bit from them, and then making the rent levels, the mix of units, and then the servicing the mortgage, and then what the mortgage will be, and those mortgage rates. So there is not at this moment a plan for Lookout to be putting like a large lump sum. That's not how it's working. We're essentially all working together to make the numbers work so that the ongoing rental income will service a debt, a mortgage, and that's how those work. Yeah.
Do we know what entity does the income testing, and if they do it just at the application process, or if they track that over the years to see if people maintain their eligibility?
I believe that's part of what Lookout will do, because they'll be the ongoing landlord collecting rent and doing those things, that they would probably be part of that. Whether the initial one, again, the local housing organization will help with selecting tenants, but that criteria and measurement would likely be, if not coordinated with them, by Lookout. And I do believe, I'm not 100% sure, I do believe it is annually renewed. So it is something that is checked annually. And I'd have to ask them how that works if somebody's circumstances change, because we certainly wouldn't want somebody to be, kicked out of their home because they were doing better and making more money. So it's actually, as I'm talking, that's a great thing for us to bring up, that to sort of know, everybody knows how that works. Daniel, was that a little?
Yeah, I know for the our housing agreement, I think for the apartment building, the 510 Trunk Road, they have like income thresholds for tenants for their affordable housing units because they have CMHC funding. But I know in that agreement, it has there's a threshold to be an eligible tenant, but then it actually has I think it's like 25% higher than that to remain an eligible tenant. So it's kind of the idea that like you have to be at this threshold to be eligible to rent the unit. But then if life circumstance, your income does increase somewhat, you can actually, you don't need to then find a new home until it's risen, higher than that again. So.
Well, I have had conversations with people in the past who have said, I can't work more than 3 days a week because my income threshold will go up and I'd have to find another place to live.
Yeah.
So it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't thing.
So hopefully we can avoid that. And these are great questions. So this is something I'll definitely clarify as we're moving through, and hopefully we have that all crystal clear by the time we're actually putting out, requests for applications and all of that stuff. My personal hope, and I don't know how it exactly works, but my personal hope would be that you wouldn't ever have to move from your unit. Because I don't think it's going to be like this unit is this subsidized thing, this unit, it's all a mix, right? So hopefully the idea is that if somebody does, their life improves and they make more money, they just maybe get shifted to a different category. They don't need the subsidy anymore. That frees up another unit to get a subsidy. I'm hoping that's how it will work, but these are great questions. So I'll
that would be the great thing.
Out.
Yeah, like the hope of the building, because it has that split, is like, okay, now you've transitioned from this category to this category.
Yeah. But yeah, you're right. You're right. Hopefully it's such a great building, nobody ever moves out, but I'm sure there might be, I'm sure there will be some sort of turnover, and we'll have to ask BC Housing about that too. So yeah, that's great. And then another question, or sorry, Allison, something you said a few minutes ago reminded me, because I think you previously in a meeting asked for a copy of the grant approval. So I'm going to see if we can get that. It might be some confidential information, but what I am preparing, because we're planning some engagement later in the summer, so BowFest and the Farmers Market at the end of August, that we're planning to prepare essentially a one-pager. And so that'll have some basic information about the project, the rent mix that I just explained, how much in a grant we received, just sort of the high level bits of information that aren't confidential, that are totally publicly available, and to explain the project. And then I'm hoping on the backside we're going to create an FAQ, a frequently asked questions. Because I think lots of people are going to have questions, just like we're discussing, who's selecting the tenants, when is the wait list starting? So we're going to try to answer all of those. And so at the end of the summer, we're planning to have some engagement and have those available for people, and obviously on the website. And so yeah, that's our goal that we're heading towards for the end of the summer.
Is there any ceiling on has BC Housing, you're talking about making the numbers work, and the numbers work because you need the rent level income has to pay for the mortgage payments and the ongoing operations and maintenance. What's the rent mix to rates in order to do that? Or is that still being number crunched?
Well, we had a preliminary one that went in with the application, because basically you have to prove it works with the application, and that's as part of the evaluation of the application. They have to be convinced that it will work. And I do believe as you move through, it all gets adjusted. And we don't know at this stage exactly what it's going to cost to build. Anytime you're doing a construction project, right, you have a budget, you get the estimates from the professionals and all of that. So everybody's doing their best guesses as they move along, and then it'll all get reconciled at the end. But with the 20% of at the low income and the 50% rent geared to income, those are obviously limited. And then you also don't know, especially the rent geared to income, everybody's income's a little bit different. So that'll fluctuate depending on the person. So there's a lot of moving parts. And I think it's all just really the flexibility is on, some of those numbers and the rent levels and maybe the low end of market. And also then BC Housing's biggest thing is their subsidy changes, right? How much money they have to put in. So that's their biggest concern as we move through the project, to make sure they're happy and satisfied with that number. So I don't know at this stage that we can share the rent levels yet. I can certainly ask how much we can share, because we're a couple of years away, at least, if not 3 years away from occupancy and starting to charge rent. So we certainly don't want to set anybody's expectations, but like I say, that's
So there's
70%.
nothing in the
I'm
grant that says
excited.
the monthly rent can't be any higher than X.
No, it gives those formulas, like I say. So the 20,
Okay.
you know, the
All right.
low income, the rent geared to income, and then that low end of market. That's the one I honestly just don't remember off the top of my head. But there is a, you know, a guideline as to how that's calculated. It's not just sort of picked out of the air. You have to have some, I think, regional rent levels or local rent levels, and then it's some, you know, level below that. But I don't recall those numbers off the top of my head. Okay.
I think CMHC comes up with that market rent, low end of market rent. Yeah.
You might be
It's
right
based
about
on
that.
their
Yeah.
numbers.
Yeah, I think it's geared to CMHC from the other one.
That makes sense. Yeah. And Bowen is a little tough because we don't have a lot of hard rental data on rent prices. So, okay. Anything else on this topic before we move on? That was 4.3. So about the project on
I think
Miller Road.
Nigel has his hand up.
Oh,
No,
sorry.
it was a
did I miss it?
mosquito.
Oh.
It's that time of year. Okay, great. Well, thank you. That was a great discussion. And I will ask some of those questions and hopefully bring some clarification next time we meet. And yes, do keep an eye out for those engagement things. We'll be at BowFest and we'll be at the Farmers Market on Labor Day long weekend, chatting to everybody about that. And that's a great segue into 4.4, which is Lot 1. So we'll be talking about both those things, the Miller Road project and the project we're doing on Lot 1. I don't have a ton to update on this one. We completed the engagement. We're basically gearing up. We're doing a delegation to council on July 22nd. So we'll be doing a presentation. So we're essentially just gathering all of the work that we've done to date, which is, you know, reviewing everything we've done, doing some engagement, looking at what the gaps are, kind of identifying what the main points are that we have to explore over the next few months towards the end of the year and the end of the project, this phase of the project. So yeah, we're working on that. So do tune in July 22nd or later on YouTube, and we'll be giving a presentation then. And then it's a delegation, which is mostly a sort of just presentation. And then our hope is in the fall, we can do a committee of the whole. So it can be, we'll have more information and more to discuss. So we thought we'd do a shorter one now just as a check-in to say, here's where we're at. And then in the fall, hopefully with council, a more robust committee of the whole, so we can have more dialogue and discussion. Yeah, so brief update on that one, but yeah, stay tuned. Any questions on the Lot 1 project with Tomo and where we're up to? Nope, seeing none. Okay. There we go. We made it. It's a relatively short meeting. We have new business, 5.1. Is there any? Oh, I might have spoken too soon. Is there any other new business? Anybody has? No, seeing shaking heads. Okay, there we go. And then there was some information items that went out along with it. And one thing I was glad to see that letter from our MP, Patrick Wheeler, about the cooperative housing. That's been an interesting development that's happened in the last month or two, is there's sort of new federal funding for co-op housing, which is exciting because I'm a big fan of co-op housing. I think it's a great way to go. So, and that's something we're talking about in terms of tenure and stuff for Lot 1 and exploring. So, yeah.
Can I just speak to, sorry,
Please.
6.2, I guess.
Yes.
So earlier this month, no, late June, the province actually came out with guidelines for their housing needs report update, or interim housing needs report. And they say that in July, they're going to come out, mid-July, they're going to come out with like an online tool to calculate that housing needs number. And meanwhile, Metro Vancouver offered to assist municipalities in doing that work. So I've put Bowen on the list to have Metro Vancouver run our numbers. And then essentially our interim housing needs report will need to be those updated numbers of 20-year projected housing need. And then I think it's like 2 statements, and one will be addressing like what the municipality's done for affordable housing. And I forget what the other one is, but so that one maybe we'll talk about the lookout agreement to lease. Yeah, and they're interesting. I don't know, maybe in September we'll have it on the as an agenda item to go over. One of the things that they're looking for is essentially asking municipalities to calculate what they're calling almost like suppressed housing need. And it's looking at what are called maintainer rates in comparison to like historic maintainer rates. So the kind of the hypothesis is that if your municipality has not built enough housing, one of the results is that like fewer people will form their own household. So like you'll see more people living with roommates or staying with their parents. And if you do a traditional housing need projection, you won't capture that because you'll say, oh, we've grown at this rate and we're going forward at this rate. And it doesn't capture that like, well, if you built more housing, more people would have lived in homes. So it's sort of interesting how the province is trying to do that and trying to say, no, you can't not build housing, people move away, and then you say, oh, look, there's nobody here, we don't need more housing. So I'm curious what Metro will come up with. One of the things we're not clear on is like the province outlines the data that's needed, but some of it may not be available for Bowen, so we may have to figure out how to address that. But yeah, so I may have that up. I should have something for the September meeting to look at in terms of an interim housing needs report.
Great, that's really exciting. Yeah, so Steph, we'll add that to the agenda. We'll check in closer and see how it's going. But yeah, that's great. Allison, yep.
I was cleaning out my emails the other day, and when I'm reading news releases and various things, I sometimes extract something and send myself something. And so I did that for something, but I can't find my source. But it was for, it talked about budget, the federal 2024 budget, creating a new Infrastructure Canada fund, and call a Canada Housing Infrastructure Fund. And 2 streams in it, money available to munis for infrastructure that's needed, and then agreements with provinces and territories to get money in for housing and things like that. So Daniel, have you seen anything? Or is this just sort of,
I think I saw that when
yeah,
and I brought it to Liam.
yeah, so part of it was 5 billion for agreements with provinces and territories to support long-term priorities. And they had a bunch of different things, so.
I found
Okay.
a
So
website.
Liam at the time had
yeah.
said he thought it looked like they were funding it, but like they would fund it through the provinces if they reached an agreement. So
Okay.
So Liam was saying at the time, he's like, he thought program applications will likely open by the summer of 2025.
Yeah, because it says provinces will have until January 1, 2025 to secure an agreement.
Yeah.
So
So
it's still much in the working stages. Yeah. Okay.
But yeah,
But there
it's
may
of
be
interest.
money out there.
It's of interest to us in part because could be infrastructure funding for things like sewer systems.
Exactly.
Yeah, so on our radar.
That's great. And I just put in the chat, I Googled it and found the link to the press release. So it is out there. Yeah.
Okay.
That's great. Yeah. Thanks, Allison, for putting that on our radar. Yeah. Okay. Anything else as we close up? Any other questions? Our next meeting is Friday, September 13th at 9:30. So everybody has August off. Yay. We can all take a break. Any final thoughts or questions before we sign off? No. Okay, great. Well, thanks everybody. Enjoy your summer. Thanks for all your hard work. And we'll pick it back up in September and hit the ground running, hopefully. Lots to do.
Excellent.
Okay, thanks everybody. I'll adjourn the meeting and we'll see you soon.
Well, can we get Steph to send everybody a reminder about the presentation from you and Tomo on the 22nd? Or everybody just remember to
I think put it in your calendar.
Zoom in and watch it. Yeah.
Yep. Zoom in and watch. And then if you forget, you can watch
maybe just put a little note in the minutes and maybe people will remember. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. All righty.
All right. Thanks everybody.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.